Hey guys, subscribe for daily knife content. And if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and welcome to part 2 of my new series, The Very Best EDC Folding Knife. This is a 6-part series. The first episode we have already completed. That was overall length and blade length, which we came to a conclusion. Roughly 7 inches to 7.5 inches overall and a 2.9 inch blade. If you'd like to see how I came to that conclusion, please feel free to check out the playlist for this series, and you can watch that first episode. As you can see here, we're going to move on today to materials, and 3 through 6, the titles are going to be listed in there. But anyways, before we get started, keep in mind this series is not meant to change your mind. It's not meant to state factually what absolutely is the best for everybody. No, I'm actually coming at this from my perspective, based on my usage habits, right? What have I found over the course of, the last 10 years, and especially, during the channel, during the life of the channel, the last 3 years and 1,600 uploads. What is it I'm reaching for? Why am I reaching for it, right? I'm going to give my thoughts. Keep in mind, I truly believe that 80% of people who carry a knife do simple things with their knives, simple tasks that includes cutting open boxes, right? Packages, tape, cardboard, rubber, rope, maybe a little bit of light digging and scraping, right? Maybe some, maybe cleaning out your fingernails, right? Stuff like that, just general stuff. So, while my conclusions will not, it won't solve everything for everyone, I think this is going to speak to a wide range of people. But as per usual, take the parts of this that pertain to you and your usage habits, right? And then you can ignore the rest. You certainly don't have to take it as fact. As that piece of paper showed, we're going to be talking about materials today. What I think makes sense, coming at the hypothetical idea of an ideal or the perfect, the very best EDC folding knife. What I think the best materials are, taking the enthusiast out of it, and also taking the budget element, trying to best bang for your buck. We're going to ignore those two things, right, and just pure utilitarian. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there is a link right down in the description. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Very active on Instagram. So, materials. We're going to be talking about handle materials. We're going to be talking about blade steel, all that stuff today. First off, let's talk about the different types of materials that you're likely to see on your common EDC folding knife, right? I'm not going to talk about the crazy exotic stuff, obviously, since we are ignoring the enthusiast element here. I mean, I have a whole series dedicated to this type of thing from an enthusiast perspective. You can check that out. It's called The Quest for the Perfect Folding Knife, right? But considering that we're trying to hypothetically create an ideal tool, or I am, in my opinion, trying to create an ideal day-to-day tool, right? So crazy stuff like your gold flake carbon fiber, right? Your zirconium, stuff like that has more enthusiast than utility in it. That kind of stuff is going to be ignored. What we do see a lot of is titanium, G10, micarta, injection mold plastic, other forms of injection mold plastic, aluminum, right? That's kind of generally what we see. I've got a lot of knives out here that are in titanium, and mainly it's because they represent different blade steels we're going to talk about, but we're just going to talk about handle materials first. I found that while I might prefer a knife, like from an enthusiast perspective, I love my full titanium XM18s. I like these big, heavy, like the 80-20, right? I like these big, chunky, heavy titanium knives. They make me feel, capable, right? The funny thing is in practice, while I do carry this S35VN titanium XM, absolutely, this guy sees plenty of pocket time, as you can see by the pocket clip. I'm aware that it's in my pocket, right? And admittedly, after about 30 minutes to an hour, I kind of forget that it's there, right? But it's not the same experience as what I get with like the Para 3 or the QSP Penguin, right? Now, this isn't budget versus expensive. I'm just using examples that happen to be less expensive than the XM18. This isn't necessarily about price. Same with the Rat 2, right? The Civivi Ortus. They're just lighter weight. It's a smaller profile, right? I've found that it's just a little bit more enjoyable. It's less cumbersome, right? It just makes a little bit more sense. And there's some other benefits there to having a smaller profile in the blade as well. But when it comes to materials, I love titanium. I love how it feels and how it looks. But the truth is that it can create a balance issue. Titanium also it tends to be a little bit slippery, even when it's textured, right? It does. I mean, in the 80-20, right? I mean, you've got the ergonomic lines that are going to hold you, and we're going to talk about that later. It also tends to be much more expensive. As soon as you add titanium to something, it just makes it a lot more expensive. So, even though this isn't necessarily about price, right, it is something that I kind of want to consider. If I can, if I was trying to design a knife that was going to be perfect for me, solve the issue of excess or unnecessary weight, even though you could make an argument for strength, right? Solve the issue of unnecessary and excess weight, and also solve an issue of possibly balance, right? And maybe go for something that can be textured in a way that's less slippery and a little more grippy, or just complements the ergonomic lines. I'm going to say titanium is out. Even though that is what I want on my ideal, like my perfect enthusiast folding knife, titanium is really not from my experience, it's not the best material, right? I also have come to find that, a couple more in titanium still sitting out there. I've also come to find that while aluminum is, really good in terms of like weight, aluminum is great in creating a lightweight design. And it tends to be a little bit more chalky on the finish because they do the Type 3 hard coat anodizing. And it doesn't tend to be very expensive, right? I think aluminum would be a decent choice, but it's still, I mean, we've got the blur here, and it's got the little TrackTech inserts, and that's fine, that creates traction, but a lot of times, that's something that you'd have to inlay into the material to make it less slippery than it is. While aluminum, I think, is a little bit more grippy than titanium, and all the way around, makes it's more lightweight and still really strong, right? A lot of good things there, but if, it's got to be, even when it's textured, I still find it to be a little bit more slippery than, say, the injection mold plastic, micarta, or G10. So I think aluminum's not something that I'm going to be interested in as something that's ideal. And remember, we're not going for any flash or anything like that. The nice thing about the materials left over is that they're incredibly resilient to, heat and cold, right? They don't expand or contract, right? They can be easily shaped, inexpensively shaped from a manufacturing standpoint. Lightweight, they're durable, they create excellent balance in a knife, right? These are all materials that are going to be more preferable, in my opinion. Now, micarta, and I know people are like, what about carbon fiber? You didn't put anything out there in carbon fiber. Carbon fiber looks great, and it's plenty strong. But again, I mean, and it can be textured, right? But again, it's a material that's going to add a little bit of unnecessary cost to the knife. And taking the enthusiast perspective out of it completely, there are just other materials that I mean, like the carbon fiber, to me, has that extra element of flash that's unnecessary. And there are materials that cost less to machine and manufacture that will do pretty much exactly the same thing. Now, again, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to tell you if you enjoy some of these, more premium materials that you're wrong. No, this is just it's a take on the same series that I've been doing, right? I've done Quest for the perfect budget knife. I've done Quest for the perfect folding knife from an enthusiast standpoint. And now we're doing kind of the in-between, right? So I completely understand those perspectives. Everybody wants something different from their knife. But day to day, reaching for the same thing over and over again, why do I, this whole series is based on why do I keep reaching for the Spyderco Para 3 if I love knives like the XM18 so much, right? Well, it's because I found that day to day, Spyderco Para 3, being the simple and straightforward utilitarian tool that it is, has pretty much everything that I need. And it happens to be in G10, so I've come to, kind of focus in and figure out what I appreciate. Micarta, I think, is great. I think it'll stand up, basically just as well as the injection mold plastic or G10. It does react to liquid a little bit differently than G10. You dunk, something like the Ortis in water, right? This gets wet. it basically makes no difference. Same with G10. It's going to be just as grippy. It really doesn't create that much, different of an experience. I mean, obviously anything is wet is going to be a little bit more slippery. But micarta gets kind of slimy. Anybody who's used micarta in a wet environment, it looks great. It's plenty durable, right? Pretty resilient to heat and cold. But it gets a little slimy. It's kind of bothersome. I mean, I love micarta. Believe me, I love micarta. It's the QSP Penguin and D2. Love it. But I don't think it's going to be ideal. Truthfully, I mean, this is going to be kind of a boring answer, guys, but the best materials for a knife, I know people are wondering what this is. We'll talk about this. This is the front scales in G10. The back here is titanium. The best material, I think, for a day-to-day EDC folding knife is going to be either G10 or the injection mold plastic. It's plenty lightweight. It's incredibly strong. Personally, I prefer G10 a little more. This peel ply textured G10 that's on the Spyderco Para 3 is just about perfect. I mean, this is one of those things that's really easy to me to understand why. I don't need my knife to be incredibly lightweight. Right? I mean, like the injection mold plastic, Grivery, and stuff like that tends to be like extremely lightweight, which is why knives like the Benchmade Bug Out, come in without they don't have a steel liner in them, and they're already a thin profile, and the Grivery is hollowed out, so you can get that thing down to, what do they weigh, like 1.85 ounces? Okay, great. I don't need my knife to be that lightweight. I'm not so frustrated by the 3.5 ounces that my Para 3 comes in at. Is that what it comes in at? Hang on. This has a steel cartridge liner, or I'm sorry, it's an embedded or countersunk liner. Boy, that guy's dirty. But yeah. 3.49, that's fine with me. It's perfect. I get the I get it backed up by a steel cartridge liner, so that feeling of solidity and just honestly just peace of mind if I do have to use the thing in kind of an extreme scenario. I like the idea that the scales are backed up with a steel liner, right? So for me, you don't have to agree with me. For me, the ideal handle material for a day-to-day knife is G10. Yeah, you sat here for 12 minutes to hear me say that, sorry. But I have to explain it. That's the whole reason for the multi-part series. Quick sidestep. A big reason for this is because I have so many people, day-to-day, hundreds and hundreds of people, popping in, watching one video, and going, why this? Why did you say this? Why do you think this? And I direct them to a video. And some people get a little bit frustrated with me. No, I don't want to watch a video. I just want you to tell me. Well, consider I have dozens of people wanting the same thing all the time, and I keep having to explain the same thing all the time from my perspective. Rather than sit and have a big, long... Because, I mean, let's face it, guys. Some people really just want to have an argument in the comment section. I'm just not about that. So I tell them, I'm not going to type up, this big, long thing and tell you and the next, 1,000 people. I make these series so that I can give my perspective in, a multi-part, very detailed series, so that people can understand that's why he thinks what he thinks. And then you can either ignore it completely, or you can, kind of step into it, lean into it, I guess, or you can just take the parts that make sense, right? And people can think whatever they want. That's why I do it this way. That's why I have these series. Moving on here, I do think it's important to have a countersunk steel liner underneath the G10. But if you removed it, it would save an extra ounce. Then you could have a 2.5 ounce knife that's arguably just as capable. Fine, that's a totally reasonable argument. I want the steel liner there. I like the feeling of solidity. I like how G10 feels when it's backed up with a steel liner. I like that. This feels more solid. I don't like it when G10 scales flex. You guys know what I mean? When you've got a solid G10 or Grivery knife. It's just, this one's still got the liners. If it was all plastic or all G10, it flexes a little bit. I don't like that. I don't like that. If you've ever really bared down on a knife while you're cutting into... I cut some ridiculously thick cardboard from a table that we ordered with the Spyderco Para 3 here recently, and I was squeezing that thing, bearing it down, driving that blade through this... It had to be maybe a 1/5 of an inch thick cardboard, a 1/4 inch thick cardboard. Yeah. You bear down on a knife like that and you feel it flex, oh, your confidence goes out the window. Nope, don't want it to flex. You probably don't need the steel liners, but I absolutely want them. And it's also not going to add a lot of cost, right? Either way, there's something for the, the washers. It's got to be something for the washers to ride on. So you can't write. It can't be riding just, or I don't think it's a good idea to have it riding just on G10. It's going to wear down much faster. So either way, you might as well, do the whole liner instead of just one area up by the pivot. Just do the whole thing with a countersunk liner. Why countersunk? Keeps everything nice and together and without having to add excess thickness or shave down the scales, right? I think it's good that you countersink it and you keep the profile as narrow as possible without sacrificing any strength, right? That way you don't have excess or unnecessary thickness. And in the case of the Spyderco Para 3, the whole package comes in at a very strong, very robust 3.5 ounce knife. I think that's about what I want it to be, by the way. And since, I'm not going to do a specific episode talking about weight because it ties in so well with what I'm talking about here, materials. It's another reason why I want the materials this way and the size this way is because the Spyderco Para 3 comes in at 3.5 ounces. I've maintained that anything under 3 ounces I just call ultra lightweight. The difference between a 1 ounce knife and a 2.9 ounce knife to me is completely trivial. I understand that it's not trivial for some people, but those some people probably make up less than 1% of the people who are watching this right now. Walking around day to day in jeans doing regular stuff, yeah. 3.5 ounces is enough to remind me that it's there, which I prefer, but it's lightweight enough that it's not, it's not reminding me, so like, I'm here, I'm this big brick of an object in your pocket, right? Yeah. Any lighter than that, and I found that I forget that it's in there, and I wash it, right? This guy is another reason why I prefer the G10. This guy coming in we're turning this sideways here. The Civivi Ortis. It's almost a little too light. 2.82 ounces. It's fine. Honestly, I think anything between 3 and 3.5 ounces is going to be very, very preferable. And considering the conclusion that I came to in episode 1, 7 to 7.5 inches overall, and a 2.9 inch blade, if you're using these materials, I think you're almost indefinitely going to end up in that territory, right? So weight preferences, right there. It's just going to be a product of the materials that I find more preferable for reasons that I just stated. Blade steel, right? Oh, we should talk about pivot hardware. Listen, I mean, this is really simple to me. I like bearings. I like the fall shut action, right? Not a big fan of nylon washers. They're fine, but they are less durable. And even though it is very unlikely that something's going to get inside the pivot and tear up the washers, I just prefer phosphor bronze. The Spyderco Para 3 is a great example of how phosphor bronze can yield an incredibly smooth and fidgety action. And at the same time, you gain the benefit of debris not being able to get inside the pivot as easily, right? Slowing everything down. This guy's dirty. This guy's not something that I clean and maintain all the time, right? I've never taken this knife apart, ever. I don't do crazy stuff with my knife, and I'm not out, throwing it in the mud or anything like that. I'm just regular stuff. I don't need to take it apart. So yeah, phosphor bronze, I mean, obviously we're going for a build quality that's going to yield, good fit and finish. The surfaces are going to be, polished enough that you can get this type of action. We'll talk a little bit more about that in deployment, but it is a material. We're talking about materials today, so yeah, phosphor bronze is going to be, I think, the ideal. Right. The bearings, to me, they do, in some situations, create an advantage in deployment, right? But if you have the right deployment type, which we're going to talk about in deployment, then, it allows the hardware to function just as well, right? I can't deploy my XM18, which is running on bearings, any faster than I can deploy my Spyderco Para 3. So there's no advantage there. In fact, the bearings just create a disadvantage because more debris can get inside there and slow everything down. Phosphor bronze, way less likely that's going to happen, right? So yeah. And also hardware. Truthfully, I mean, would titanium hardware be ideal? Sure, but it in my experience, it adds unnecessary costs. I've never had a problem with steel hardware, right? A T8 pivot, I think this is actually a little bit bigger. T8 pivot and no more than 2 T8 screws on each side with a couple of standoffs. Why? Because it keeps everything nice and open. If I do need to clean something out, I can run a rag through there, right? Nice and smooth on the inside. It'd be nice to have the cartridge liners a little bit cut out so that there's some, I guess, some weight saving, right? Where's a good example? QSP Penguin probably has. Does it have some weight saving holes? No. Is there a knife in here that's going to have that? I think maybe the, yeah, there we go. Weight reduction holes, I think, is fine. Some debris is going to get caught up and kind of sit in there. That's fine for the most part. Compressed air will blow all of that stuff out. But I want access to the knife. I want nice open access. A couple of nice robust standoffs are going to be just fine. It's going to keep the integrity, right? It's going to keep that, coupled with the cartridge liner. It's going to keep it from being too flexible, and it's still going to be super easy to maintain. Reason for the T8 screws: T6 sucks and they strip out too easily. Obviously, you know, Spyderco has had an issue in the past with maybe whatever they're using for the screws is a little soft, right? So even their T8s, obviously some decent, you know, I think that the depth in the head is also very important, right? If you have to save some money on whatever it is that you're using for screws, depth of the head is important. That way the teeth on your Torx bits are biting enough. So you can make use of the larger, less likely to strip bit size, T8, right? It's great. Doesn't need to be any bigger than that. I definitely don't want it smaller than that. But the bit should be able to sink in enough that it's biting. Just minimal. It doesn't. You don't need a different size. You don't need T10 and then T8, 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 T8. And the pocket clip screws can be whatever, right? Because they don't necessarily, in an ideal design, the pocket clip does not necessarily have to be removed. That makes disassembly incredibly easy. Now, how easy is going to depend on the lock type and a bunch of other stuff, which we're going to talk about in lock type. But yeah, as far as hardware goes. All right, 21 minutes in, blade steel. Blade steel. There's a lot of different steels. A lot of different steels that you could use, right? We all live in different areas. We use our knives for different things, right? People who live near the ocean, you're probably going to want something that's basically impervious or that cannot corrode, right? This is Terravantium on the Terrain 365 Invictus. This is not actually steel; it's dendritic cobalt. It can't corrode, rust. Corrosion will not form on this blade, and that's something that's ideal for somebody who lives or works in or around the ocean. Not everybody does. In fact, the vast majority of us don't do stuff like that. So that's an extreme scenario where my conclusion is not going to be ultra beneficial for those people. If you work near, in, or around the ocean, yeah, you're going to need a steel like that. You're going to need H1, something like dendritic cobalt, or you can go with LC200N, or is it Super Clean Venatus? It's not Venatus. Number 37, the Super Clean steel. Yeah, something like that. You're going to need something that's not going to form corrosion. If you're like me and you live in an area where corrosion's not nearly as much of a problem, then you can get away with a tool steel, something that's not stainless or something that has, you know, I think, what's the line? 14% chromium, right? Steels like M4, 3V, K390, Rex 45. I'm naming this stuff so that people don't think, is he aware of these other steels? Is this just some guy that's talking? Does he even know about the? Yeah, I do. I promise you. I know about all the I know about all the weird stuff, right? A million different steels, right? If you live in an area where corrosion's not a problem, okay, there's a bajillion steels out there that are non-stainless that have excellent toughness and excellent edge retention, since I'm sure all of you are going to fetishize edge retention. That's just what people do. I would ask you to take a step back and think about how important it is in your day-to-day that maximum edge retention is a part of it. I EDC a knife with Maximate steel because I was interested in Maximate. I live in an area in Kansas here, Midwestern Kansas. Corrosion's really not that much of an issue. Obviously, if I'm going to be poking this into something that's wet all the time, then I got to wipe it down. But as you can see, it's formed a pretty mild patina over the last year and a half. Yeah, it's just kind of darkened. That's really all that happened, right? It's fine. Oil it up once a month or so, and I'm good to go. I think, you know, considering the wide range of territories that people live in and the different types of things that, even considering the whole 80% of people are using their knives for just regular stuff. Maybe you're like me and you only get your knife out 5 to 10 times a week, right? That's who you're getting this information from. A regular guy who gets his knife out to cut regular stuff 5 to 10 times a week and doesn't want to be weighed down by every single tool that I could possibly need in any conceivable circumstance. People who want to tell me, you should be carrying the right tool for the job. Thanks. I want my pants to stay on. Anyways, not everybody works on a construction site and needs to carry a toolbox around with them. Most people don't. Most people are simply going to carry their phone, their wallet, and a pocket knife. Maybe one other thing, right? If you're like me, that's what you want to carry. I don't want to be weighed down by a bunch of stuff. I want room in my pockets for other things that I might need to fill them with throughout the day, right? So anyways, blade steel. Blade steel could be a whole bunch of different stuff, but if we're gonna talk about what's going to benefit the vast majority of people, I think it is important to have a stainless property, right? We don't necessarily need to maximize edge retention. I also don't necessarily need to maximize toughness, right? So I don't necessarily need a steel like 3V for myself, or what I assume is, again, the 80% of people just doing regular stuff with their knife. I think edge retention is important. I also think stainless qualities are definitely important, right? So my favorite steel of all time, like for me, I find it to be incredibly well-rounded. 154 cm or CPM 154, which in the case of the composition of 154 cm, they're almost exactly the same. It's a totally different monster if you're talking about a composition like D2. Carbide formation and the benefit from the powder-formed version of the steel is totally different. 154 cm versus CPM 154, no, they're basically going to perform almost exactly the same because of the composition, right? That's great. I think that better steels, have existed, and that more beneficial steels, for more people have existed. Sometimes the best steel is not necessarily the one that's the most well-rounded, but I think 154 cm would be an excellent choice. We're not necessarily trying to go bang for buck, right? So your 9CR 18 MOV and these budget steels, can you get by with them? Yeah. Are there better choices? Could we create... Is it worth spending a little bit more money to get something that's a little bit better? It's more beneficial, right, for long-term use? Yeah, I think so, right? Same with D2. Damascus, I know a lot of people automatically, if you're new to the knife world, it's really easy to assume that Damascus or Damasteel must be the ultimate thing. Now, it's actually more of an art thing, right? There's cheap Damascus, there's expensive Damascus. Damasteel is a much more performance-oriented version of that. Damasteel is made with RWL34, which performs very similarly to CPM 154, so it's going to be really similar to that steel. But you're going to pay a crap load of money for it because you're also going to get the aesthetic. Damascus can be made with, this is sort of a laminate Damascus, right? But it's actually got performance that's pretty similar to VG10 because the core is VG10 in this guy. It just looks beautiful. So basically, it's VG10 that you have to pay more money for because it's really pretty. Now, it depends on what the Damascus is made out of. You can find Damascus on eBay for about 15 bucks. Looks nice, but it's going to perform like garbage, right? So not all Damascus is created the same, but Damasteel is something that's very specific, and it is all created exactly the same other than the pattern that's on it. So we're not here to talk about that today. S30V, one of the old reigning champions for just versatility. I think it'd be a decent choice, but I think there's better stuff out there. Also remove this guy. Maximate, yeah, I mean, like if you really are doing something with your knife that's going to require maximum edge retention, okay, but you're also going to have to be more than a novice sharpener. I'm kind of intimidated to sharpen this. I'm sure that I'll be able to do it. I've got the KME and I've got the diamond stones, and I'm sure I can do it, right? I don't know if that's really going to be everybody. I don't know if that's going to be perfect for everybody. This is D2. CPM 20CV M390. Oh, the reigning champion for so long. Stainless, incredible edge retention. Not very tough. I think it'd be an okay choice, day to day, right? The problem is that, like Maximate, not exactly like Maximate, it's going to be difficult to sharpen. It's also notoriously chippy. If you're going to use your knife, this is going to be a tool that's on your side all the time, and you're going to be using it for mostly knife stuff, but periodically some stuff that's not really a knife task. Like if you're scraping something off of a surface, right? Well, depending on what else you run into, beside maybe let's say you're scraping adhesive off of a surface, right? Adhesive off of tile, right? It's hard. You might chip the edge, right? If you're scraping something off of glass, glass will chip a blade. right? It's hard. I don't know if M39, and why is that important? Because if you ever tried to sharpen a chip out of something, if you have ever tried to sharpen a chip out of something like M390, holy crap, is that frustrating. I'd rather have a composition that does not, that's not prone to stuff like that, or, you know, it's not as prone. 20CV I think would be okay, but no, it's not, I don't think it's ideal. What do we have left out here? We have S35VN, S45VN, CPM 154. There are other very well-rounded steels that we could put here. I mean, honestly, you could put S30V out here. Steels like the Terravantium, Dendritic Cobalt, number one, they're going to be incredibly expensive, right? So that's going to add some unnecessary cost. And number two, I mean, if out here in Kansas, I don't need the crazy stainless qualities. Again, if you need, you know, if you live near the ocean, okay, great. But I think a steel that's reasonably easy to sharpen or touch up, that's reasonably tough, definitely stainless, and has good edge retention. Not great, not the best, just good. I think those are the steels we want to look for, right? In terms of edge retention, you know, we're going to lay these out here by, you know, edge retention, I guess. I think it's, if I remember correctly, this guy's going to have the least, 154 cm, S35VN, I think is not quite the same edge retention as S45VN. These two are almost exactly the same thing. S30V is going to have the most edge retention, but it also tends to be more chippy than these guys, and it's not as tough. The S35VN and S45VN are probably going to be the best choice in terms of performance for somebody who's going to use his or her knife periodically for little things, and is not, I mean, the average person is not a master sharpener. We should learn. Okay, we can yell that, but you know, in terms of knives that are going to benefit, blade steels that are going to benefit most people, and then if they do have to do some minor touching up, then you know, S35VN and S45 are going to be great. S45VN is slightly, or actually, I think it's supposed to be exactly as easy to touch up as S35VN, right? Slight benefit in edge retention, perhaps as good as S30V or close to it, but it's substantially more stainless, which means it's more attractive to more people who might live in an area where the corrosion thing is kind of on the line. This actually approaches CPM 20CV in corrosion resistance. So while S45VN seems to be incrementally different than S35VN, the small differences are really beneficial to the vast majority of people, which is why I was so curious and so, you know, intrigued by S45VN. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys I've used it enough versus S35VN and S30V that I can tell a difference definitively, but for the few people who will use their knives enough, according to Knife Steel Nerds, there is a difference. So what do I think is the best steel? I mean, there's a lot. There's so many steels that could work, right? Take your pick, right? The steel that whatever you've found that works for you is probably the best. For me, since we're doing this series and we're trying to create an ideal folding knife and we have to come to something definitive at the end of this, for me, I think S45VN is probably going to be just right. It's so stainless, I really don't have to worry about it, even if I am going to work in a wet environment. I've definitely sharpened my share of S35VN, and I find it very easy, not a problem at all to touch up. And gosh, it holds an edge for a good amount of time. Happy with it. It's plenty tough too. I don't find S35VN to have a lot of issues with, you know, chipping. It'll roll before it chips, and that's great. It's good with a lot of geometries, right? A thin geometry is going to be fantastic as you get that toughness that you don't get with 20 CV, right? But you still get a good amount of performance. And I'm not saying the best blade geometry is something like an XM18. No. Blade geometry is going to need to be much thinner. We're going to talk about that when we talk about blade shape. So, materials. G10 with a countersunk steel liner. Minimal hardware, T8 screws, right, for the pivot and body. Open with pillar construction, right? Plenty of strength. It's also going to be lightweight. And then blade steel, probably something like S45VN. This is a long one. I needed to explain exactly why I thought that. My word is not law. I'm not a professional. I don't make knives. I don't use my knives enough to really be able to say definitively that the things that I'm choosing are absolutely correct. But I am a professional at living my own life and doing what I do every day because I'm me and that's what I do every day. And as far as knowing exactly what works for me on a day-to-day basis, yeah, the only person who can say what's best for me is me. So that's the foundation for the conclusion. Are there things out there? Are there elements that I have not yet experienced that could create a better knife? Sure, we could argue infinitely about that, but I don't want to. I'm not interested in it. I'm just interested in telling you guys my thoughts up to this point. Very long episode. But yeah, this is fun. Hope you guys enjoyed episode 2. I hope it was conclusive. Like I said, you don't have to take this as absolute. If you feel like you have to argue with me, you can, but I'm not, like I said, I'm just not interested in having a big, long back and forth. I think it's okay to think what you want to think, and I think what I want to think, and then we can all just move on. But, yeah, that's going to be it for materials, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have